We have not received any questions in advance of today's meeting, although we do have some members of the public who are observing today's proceedings. So in terms of the running of today's meeting, we've got a packed agenda for today's board meeting. So if I can ask presenters to take into account the fact that board members will have read the reports and perhaps just to draw out some key points or perhaps one or two things that might have changed since the reports were first drafted. Can I welcome Rhiann Mannings to the board meeting this morning. Rhiann is here under item 3.1, the listening and learning story, and Rhiann is from the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which is literally only around the corner from us. So Rhiann, good to see you this morning, and thanks for being able to make the time to be at our board meeting. Can I also welcome Alex Brown, who is joining on Teams this morning. Alex is our new associate board member, and he is the chair of the Clinical Advisory Group. Very good to see you this morning, Alex. Can I also welcome Andrew Jones, Assistant Director of Finance, who is attending on behalf of Sally May. Can I also welcome Alex Harden, Head of Communications and Media, who is attending on behalf of Simon Blackburn. Also to Atif Ali, our Acute Clinical Services Plan Programme Director, who is attending the meeting to present on agenda item 7.1. And I'll also be welcoming Rosie Campbell, if you're not already here. So this table is a bit like the estate banqueting table in Windsor Castle, but perhaps not as long. So quite hard to see who's on the table. Rosie joining us to present the item 8.1, which is in respect of the Clantrison Health Park programme. So we do have some people observing this morning. A very warm welcome to Richard Hughes, our current Deputy Director of Nursing for the time being. In person, Becky Gammon, Assistant Director of Nursing, Hannah Jones from Audit Wales, Emma Samways from Internal Audit, and Daniel Price from Price Cymru. A very warm welcome also to Melanie Webber, Maybank, and Tom Beadle, who are public observers observing via Teams. Lisa Curtis-Jones is also, I think, due to be attending via Teams this morning. So I think that covers everybody this morning. So very good to see you all this morning. Thank you very much indeed for making the time to be here for this board meeting. We have received some apologies, however. Rachel Rowlands, Helen Lentle, Sally May, and Simon Blackburn, none of whom said they can be with us this morning. Item 1.3, declarations of interest. If I can just check if anybody needs to raise anything that's not already covered through the declarations of interest process. No, okay, thank you very much. The consent agenda, just to ensure that we're focusing on those areas that are critical to our work as a health board. We've got those matters further on in the agenda under that consent agenda item. Are there any matters listed further in the agenda that colleagues would like to bring forward? No, you're happy to leave them where they are. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item 3.1, which is our listening and learning story. Absolutely delighted that Rhiann is here today, and I think there are some slides which we've got in front of us. Rhiann, I will hand over to you. Absolutely delighted that you're with us, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. I know many of you have met me before with my To Wish Cymru hat on. I'm the founder and CEO of To Wish, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm here today to talk about this amazing man and my experiences and our family's experiences, and more importantly, his experiences of being cared for here in Cwmtnach Morgannwg Health Board. I'm going to use a script today. I never use a script, but I'm going to stick on it, otherwise I'll still be here at midday. So good morning, and firstly, thank you for this opportunity. And I want to talk about something very simple today, but really important, and that is kindness and compassion in the NHS. I know how much pressure you and your teams are under. The demands on the NHS are immense, resources are stretched, and staff are often working under extremely difficult circumstances. But I also know this, that the people who are admitted to hospital deserve to be treated in a way that I'm sure you would expect to be treated, and more importantly, how you'd expect your loved ones to be treated. They are frightened, vulnerable, and often experiencing the worst times of their lives. That's why kindness and compassion cannot be treated as optional extras. They are not the nice to haves. They are the essentials. They are in the foundation of trust, dignity and care, and what I and many others believe should be the foundations of the NHS. Our dad, Alan Jones, was truly the best. The best dad, husband and Diddy to his 5 grandchildren. He was easily pleased, kind and grateful for everything. Bought everyone flour and thanked everyone for everything. He was admitted to the Royal Glamorgan Hospital with pneumonia and COVID last November. And this is where he and our family witnessed some examples of wonderful care, but sadly saw and heard things that eventually made our dad adamant he would never come back to hospital. He said he felt a nuisance, that no one liked him, and that he didn't like them snapping at him. This was the impression I sadly got on a number of occasions. These vulnerable gentlemen at the end of their lives were feeling worthless, and that's not acceptable. Here are some of the examples that we experienced. Staff eating boxed Domino's pizzas, leaning on the walls outside the bereavement room, laughing and messing around when there were clearly a family bereaved in there. A nurse sternly told my dad to make an effort, move up the bed, as she was too busy to hang around. It'd been a long day and she was exhausted. This happened on a number of times. Our mum and dad being approached about the DNR over and over again. Very distressing, and surely once or twice should be enough if noted properly. My 70-year-old mum being allowed to stay overnight when my dad was fighting for his life on the first night of admission. I asked if the chair could be replaced because it was like an old-fashioned school chair. No, we don't have any. I asked for a blanket or a pillow for my 78-year-old mum. I was told no, we don't do that. And in the morning, when I returned 10 hours later, my mum hadn't been offered a cup of tea or a glass of water. Twice our dad was told he was improving, but within a few hours being put on antibiotics without telling him or us why. When the doctor was asked, they said, well, at his age, he may never recover. My sister being asked to move back into the room my sister being asked to go into the room by a nurse because a body was being taken to the morgue, was her exact words. Being told that his bed was now needed and being told he needs to go back onto the COVID ward. This 83-year-old scared man had almost died of COVID and was being told to go back into the lion's den. When we questioned it, we were told it was the only option. Several occasions, my sister and I helped cover up gentlemen who were clearly agitated, taking their clothes and blankets off. And when going out and when ignoring our bell, we went out to the nurses' station to find them chatting about their weekends. I don't think this is too much to ask from an organisation that touches everyone's lives at some point. Basic human decency should be given, especially in spaces where compassion and support are central to their work. I wouldn't expect my team to ignore a bereaved family who walked into our office needing help. That would be unthinkable. Just as a supervisor at Tesco wouldn't expect a cashier ignoring a customer at the till while chatting to a colleague. This is common courtesy, surely the bare minimum we owe each other. My dad came home before Christmas, and although we had to monitor his eating due to a risk of aspiration, we had a wonderful time together. We also knew he was likely to have a feeding peg fitted soon, and this was escalated when sadly he contracted pneumonia again and was admitted straight after Christmas with potential sepsis. Our world came tumbling down when the doctor discovered a large tumour in his throat when trying to fit the peg. This was never anything anyone expected, family or the doctor. We do believe this diagnosis was missed despite numerous tests around his swallow and the pre-Christmas 6-week stay. However, this was something the family and I decided we did not want to dwell on, and instead made the most of the time we'd left with our dad. On this next visit, the following examples happened. We heard 2 doctors in A&E talking about a patient who'd been readmitted, saying that she was a pain. The doctor said it's all about pacification. Let's pacify these patients. A doctor watched while they were on their computer, while me and my sister tried to get my ill dad into the bed because he was distressed and ignored us. He had tests, he had his blood pressure taken. People did things to my dad without even saying good morning, hello, how are you? Dad was catheterised one day when we came in. And the nurse explained it's because he couldn't have a wee in the middle of the, which was totally understandable. When the doctor came in, the doctor didn't understand why he'd been cathetered. I will leave that to you to wonder. The gentleman over the ward from him, really lovely, well-to-do gentleman, asked for a shave 5 times one day. In the end, the nurse said, "I'm sorry, you're not my priority." My dad had his phlegm suctioned many occasions in the morning. This was never cleaned out and built up over 7 days behind him on the wall. Being told he was on 30-minute obs, being left for 5 hours, and when we mentioned it to the nurse ignored us for the next 3 weeks on the ward. We were lucky to have open visiting, but no communication between the nurses. So a number of occasions my mum was asked to leave, which really distressed her because my dad was sat while people enjoyed their roast dinners and he couldn't eat anything. Watching a man who had been in hospital for 4 months with all his belongings in 3 carrier bags, being told he wasn't allowed to take 3 carrier bags on the transport home, only 2 were permitted, and they were left for a nurse behind the reception who kindly offered to drop them off at his front door on the way home. That's all he owned. At this point, I would like to thank Dr. DeLuca, Dr. Richard Brown and Dr. Elin Davis, who were absolutely incredible with my dad, never rushed us, sat with him, touched his hand, called him Alan, and was the kindest people ever. But my dad was lucky. He had a family around him. We were able to advocate for him, to ask questions, to make sure he was listened to. But what about those who don't have anyone? What about the patients who lie in bed alone with no family to speak up for them? Who makes sure they're treated with compassion? As I said, my dad was the best. He was loved and he deserved better than he sometimes received. That's why I stand here today, not just for him, but for every person who is there today in hospital, needing not only medical treatment, but also humanity. Compassion doesn't require more budget lines or extra staff. It doesn't demand a new system or process. It starts with the way we look at people. We're taking an extra moment to listen, recognising that the person in the bed is not a patient, only a patient. They're someone's parent, partner, child, or friend. My dad died at home on Easter Sunday with us all by his bedside. He slept away peacefully and had only spent 1 day in bed. He watched the sun rise with us in the mornings and listened to the birds in the garden. We took him to Home Bargains, laughed with him and finished his word searches with him. The care our family received at home from the district nurses, the community palliative care team and the GPs was incredible. We felt supported and Dad was well cared for. But sadly, the day he took his last breath, our family were once forgotten again. Our mum had been married to Dad 3 months short of 50 years. And on April the 20th, she lost her best friend and her soulmate. It's now 5 months since our dad died and not one person has called her. So she was being supported well, but since he died, no one has called her, reached out to her, sent her a letter of condolences, a card, nothing. Nobody has offered her a light through her grief, which would have made her feel loved, and more importantly, that our dad was not just a number. I know the NHS has many challenges, and I'm not here to criticise the dedicated staff. I know I couldn't do their jobs, but that's why I don't do their jobs. But I am sure I am here to challenge us all. Never let the pressures we face strip away the most basic, most vital part of healthcare, and that is kindness. Because in the end, it's compassion that patients and families remember. It is compassion that can turn a difficult experience into one of dignity. And it is compassion that defines the true heart of the NHS. So let's together ensure that families and patients get the love and support they deserve in life, but also in death, that their lives mattered, and so do those who were left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For questions?
Thank you very much. Yeah, Rhiannon, what we usually do at the end of the listening and learning story is see if colleagues have any questions. I mean, I know we've got some further slides, so do we want to go through these first and then perhaps have some questions at the end? Is that?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Myself, I've met with a number of your colleagues, and
Sorry, just come in there. So, okay, Chair. Thank you, Rhian. And I'm really sorry to hear your story. What we've done is, as explained when we met, I just wanted to put forward some of the areas that we've been working on. So, next slide, please. So some of the areas we've worked on and picking up on the areas that you've shared with us as well. We are looking at the visiting policy, and one of the areas that we've particularly worked on is where our carers pull together carers passport with the family, with the patients, and the carers passport will be rolled out to support families and patients with what their wishes are, how they like their tea, their meal times, what they eat, what they don't like. We're going to increase the visibility of our volunteers. One of the areas we talked about was there's no way of getting a newspaper. Your dad talked that he liked to do a crossword. So we're looking at how the volunteers can come up to the wards and support that. We've also got in place the patient advisory liaison, the PALS teams. They sit under the people's experience team. So we're taking the PALS team across to the ward areas again, so they're more visible and they can support patients. We've increased our multi-faith chaplaincy service, and we've now employed imams. We cross the whole multi-faith service, and they're available for our patients for support as well. And we're looking at how our volunteers can support coordinated roles on the wards. And again, that would be an area that, like you've said, is no cost. These are volunteers that wish to work with us and support our patients and our relatives. From a nursing perspective, from a professional perspective, we're going to sit and do some reflection. And I know that when we talked, you don't want to pick those nurses out as individuals, but I think we do need to sit and we do need to reflect on how your dad felt, how you felt as a relative. So that's an important piece of work that I will be taking forward. We've also encouraging our senior nurses and our lead nurses to go back to the floor and have some visible leadership and role modelling. We've been working with HIW and we've done over 40 training for high performing teams, and that really goes back to care, compassion, respect. We're looking at a clinical leadership programme which complements the leadership programme that's already run by CTM. That's around the clinical leadership that aligns to those leadership roles. We're rolling out the training for professional standards of civility and respect. And Jenny and her team are taking forward the Stop Patient Story Toolkit. We recognise that not everybody feels comfortable coming to a board, but there are other platforms that we could use to hear our patients and our relatives' stories. And we're also working to embed the Always Patient Experience framework and hearing our patient's voice. From a bereavement perspective, I know that Donna Walker has been working closely with various charities across the health board, but we're also working at a strategic level for the children's bereavement framework, the adult bereavement framework, and the end of life. And we're in those spaces as well to support that. And I just want to thank you, Rhian, for allowing us to work with you, and you've given us some guidance on some of these after we spoke the other day. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Rhian, thank you for coming to talk to us today. And I'm so sorry that was the experience for you and your family, because that's not what any of us around this table would want the experience for any patient or family member to be. And it makes me really cross and angry, because as the chief exec of the organisation, I can't be there every day when 13,000 people are doing their jobs. But I expect people to behave in a certain way, regardless of how busy everyone is, and that is not acceptable behaviour, and it's not acceptable standards that I would expect anybody, member of staff, whether you're a senior manager, a senior nurse, a healthcare assistant, a porter. Everybody's job is to primarily make sure people are well cared for and looked after.
Yeah.
And clearly, in this occasion, we failed many times for you and your family, and all I can do is say sorry. For that, but I think it's really important also that this is a wake-up call for everybody around this table, and we need to think. And it's great, Becky's described there some of the things we're doing, but for me, there's a more fundamental point here, which is, and we've talked about this before, I get really angry that people behave in that way, and yet expect us as an organisation to do a lot for them. And we've had a conversation as a team about how we need to redress the contract with our staff to say, yes, we're here to do certain things for you. We want to make your work life as good as it can be, but there are some core expectations on you as a member of staff that are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to go through a bit of a process with our teams to reset the bar and say, actually, we're not going to tolerate this sort of thing. And if that means taking people through processes and disciplinary processes to remind people that this is not, and let alone the professional staff who've got regulatory professional responsibilities under their codes of conduct, everybody should be making sure that whenever they come into contact with a family or a patient, they are treated with respect and civility. It's a basic human expectation that we should have on everybody. And clearly, in these cases, you've not experienced that, and we need to, I think, learn from this experience and use it as an opportunity for us as an organisation to think about how we take that forward. And we will pick up out today, definitely. I'll certainly liaise with Becky and Rich and Greg and others about how we can take that risk. Because I think every member of our staff should hear that story. Because actually, I would challenge any member of our staff to sit and think, well, would that be what I would want for my mum or my dad? And I can guarantee everyone will say no. And I would hope that most people in this organisation come to work to do a good job and look after people.
Yeah.
And I don't think people do it deliberately.
Absolutely not.
But people need to appreciate the impact of their behaviours and their words, because it may only be one of 100 people you've spoken to today, but for that family member or that patient, that is the most important interaction they've heard today. And you've got to remember that every time you're talking to a patient or a family member, that your words are so important at that point, whether you're a nurse, a doctor, a physio, a porter, whoever. And I just think it's a really, really stark reminder to us all of when those things don't present themselves or people aren't behaving that way, that's the impact it has on the patient and the family, and that can't be replaced. We can't go back and change that. And I think it's really important that we take this as an opportunity to learn. And I really thank you for coming in.
Thank you for listening anyway.
Dom, there's probably a couple of questions, Rhiannon, if that's okay.
Yeah,
no.
Do you mind? Is that all right?
Sorry, Rhiannon. Please sit down.
No problem at all.
I got to stand as well. So I'm Dom, and I'm medical director. So I found that incredibly hard to listen to. I'll echo and Paul saying I can only apologise. Obviously, I know apologies isn't going to change the experience that you and your dad has had. We need to make sure that others don't have that same experience from going on. And I'm not going to repeat everything Paul said, because I obviously agree 100% with what you're saying there. I think it comes down to our values and behaviours, but also adding in value behaviours and respect and compassion comes into that sort of more. I was going to ask as well if you'd be willing to putting words into comms team's mouth, whether we could do a video of you doing that. Because there are so many events that I go to. If I could show that at the CDs forum, at the Junior Doctors Forum, and all these other things, I think we just need to get that across, because I found that hard to listen to, and I'm not on the shop floor every day. I think that's much needed. But thank you, because it's not easy coming and talking to us all from that. And I can imagine the emotions it brings up. Thank you for
anything I can do. I'd be absolutely, it's my pleasure.
we will change.
Thank you, Dom. Lisa, Lisa Curtis-Jones online, and then Patsy, and then Karen. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Hi, morning, everyone. Absolutely heartbreaking listening to that. I mean, none of us come into this field, working in care, to sort of expect that somebody's going to be treated like that. And I suppose there's a question really linked to what Dom said. If we have a video, that would help. But do we roll out sort of the learning stories on training to nursing qualifications, doctors? Because I'm sure none of those people come into this profession to be like that, but I think it'd be important in their training that they hear the story. And I think it's quite, it's a powerful thing to listen to. But I also wanted to add, I did send Greg through some information recently. My mum is a volunteer in an Iron Bever, and she's an ex-district nurse, so sort of been around a long time. And she visited Royal Glamorgan Hospital recently to visit a friend, and she wanted to compliment the nursing staff for the care that they were offering on the ward. So I just wanted to give that sort of a different view, because she didn't have to do that, but I did feed it back to Greg.
Thank you, Lisa. Patsy, and then Karen. Thanks, Patsy.
Yeah, my question for Becky really, how are we going to check all the actions that you put in place of work? Because not everybody is as brave as Rianne and would be willing to come and speak.
Yeah.
So what's that feedback loop? How are we going to do those checks?
I think at the moment this is work that we are doing and following the for example the volunteers. The areas we're doing now is recruiting, and then the check for us will be how often are they on the road? Are we doing what we're asking to do? We can then do it through our patient experience surveys that we do, so we can get that feedback. And then our carers lead this role and have the carers passport. David again will do visits to the wards and audit some of this as well, because it's important that we've picked up some of the areas we need to work on, but how we implemented them, are we able to see that's areas we're trying to get the best from? So there's some of the areas, and then the frameworks, they're all the national frameworks. We're part of that, so they'd be audited again through people's experience, through staff experiences, and through visible leadership, us being on the board, seeing it, feeling it. And that's really, really important as nurses. But we need to be visible. We need to be out there working those wards, working those shifts, visiting time, and being available for people to see us as leaders as well.
Paul, just come back
Yeah,
on that
just
one.
come back. I mean, I think it's really good that we're doing all those audit things. This is also about ward leadership.
It is.
We have band 7 nurses on wards who are fully supernumerary. They don't have to be in the numbers, and that's pretty unusual in this day and age. So there is no excuse that a ward manager isn't available to speak to a relative or a patient, or if they're unhappy. So I think there's also something about how we really bring the ward managers into this space and actually say, you've got a really clear job to, yes, run your ward and make it run efficiently and make sure that staff are, rotas are filled, but you've also got a really important role in making sure that you're available. So where patients or families, in Rianne's case, if you were unhappy about something, you knew that you've got someone you can go to and say, actually, I'm really not happy about how things are going today for my dad. And because they can deal with it there and then in the moment. And that for me is what we need. So I think there's something, we'll catch up outside of here, perhaps with you and Rich about this, but there's something about how we really bring the ward managers together and say, you've got a really important, and don't get me wrong, they've got a really tricky job, ward managers, because they're getting everything coming down on them from above. They're getting all the staff wanting to, talk to them about their rota changes and managing sickness and all that jazz. But there is a core job which they have, which is to make sure that the ward is delivering good quality care to patients and families. So I think there's something about how we might be able to do some work with them, and I think I'd be happy to be part of that conversation and sort of setting some standards and expectations. But yeah, I think it's really good.
Carolyn, and then Greg, and Catherine, do you want to come in as well?
Yeah, just briefly, thank you. I echo everything that's been said. So I chair the Quality and Safety and Patient Experience Group, and I'm just reflecting on how we can ensure in that committee that we have an equal focus on this, because we have audits, we have data, we have metrics, we have all sorts, but to hear that experience is so heartbreaking and so powerful that we've got to think about how we get that into our discussions, I think. And I think when we do our visits, I'm sure we all do, but you do go and talk to patients or relatives, and you do pick up things, and I think we can do more of that. So I felt, for me, it's thinking how personally or how in our involvement can we have more impact on this. And certainly through quality and safety and patient experience, we need to think about that, I think.
Thanks, Carolyn. Greg.
Yeah, hi, Ian. I'm Greg, Director of Nursing. Sorry, it was such an awful experience, and it's certainly not the standards I would expect from any of the nurses. To pick it up on Paul's point, when we have such powerful stories such as yours, we do ask relatives or family members to present the story to the actual ward, because it's important sometimes that the ward staff hear the story. And that's something I leave the health board in a couple of weeks, but Rich is taking over from me. So that's something that I think we need to think about, because there's nothing more powerful than a patient or a relative sitting in front of the ward team to do that. And we have done that. From a ward manager's perspective, we meet with ward managers every month across the sites. And again, if you can do something in person or digitally, again, it'd be really, really good for that. We have 3 or 4 stories which we do play very regularly to staff, just to remind them of the compassionate nature of care delivery and how, when things go wrong, the impact it has a detrimental impact it has on family members. And you will always remember the tiny things, such as I'm horrified there was pizzas outside the bereavement room. I mean, that's just awful. So I think there's many ways that we can infiltrate this story into the wider patient experience work that we do here. And I'm sure Rich and Becky will pick it up when I leave. So we'll take that forward to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rhian. Your father's name was Alan.
That's right.
And I'm just thinking, we had a very powerful story here 18 months ago of a gentleman. And we use his name a lot, and his name was Vernon, and he had an experience in Princess of Wales, and we often challenge ourselves by using the name of Vernon. And I think it's really important with the story you shared, because I think, there's something powerful, isn't there, about us remembering your father, and we need to challenge ourselves about Alan's experience, and we need to make sure that Alan's experience doesn't happen again. And I guess there's all the things that we've just spoken about, but it needs to permeate the whole organisation, because it doesn't matter who you encounter, be it some person in the till in the canteen, be it the porter that's walking down the corridor, and the service managers, anyone who works within the health board needs to understand the impact, unintentional, many of those that will have been, but understand the impact of their language and their behaviour, and not realising, as we all walk down hospital corridors, as we walk around wards, people are hearing and seeing, and we absolutely need to understand that. So I think what we've just described, it needs to permeate the whole organisation, and we need to refer to Alan, and we need to refer to Alan's experience. And if there's one thing that we can do to recognise that I think is what we need to do. So thank you very much indeed for sharing the story.
Thank you so much. That's such a big thing to say. And just so you know, I do a lot of presenting with the charity every day, and now every one of my presentations ends with Alan's legacy, because for me, I do it a lot, and they say, well, what can we do better? And all I ever finish with my dad's legacy is kindness, compassion. So thank you so much.
Rhian, as chair of the board, I just want to echo Paul's comments in saying how sorry I am to hear this awful experience, and quite frankly horrified that your father and your family have been put through something like this. You were incredibly generous in your first sentence in your presentation. You said you recognise the fact that we work in a very pressurised environment. And I think there is a risk in the NHS that we use that almost as an explanation or as an excuse for occasions where behaviours and standards fall to a poor level. And I don't think we should. It's important we do recognise that it is a very pressurised environment. Of course it is, and delivering healthcare services is hellishly complicated, but that should never ever be a reason or an explanation for why the behaviour of professionals, professional people falls to a certain level. As a board, it's our job to set the right culture, to set the right expectation, to have a meaningful, engaging, supporting, rewarding relationship with our staff, to recognise the amazing things they do day in, day out. But that should never ever cloud our judgment in a way that prevents us from recognising poor behaviour when we see it, and to hold people to the right standard that we would expect. So we will learn from this story. The whole idea of these stories is not just to hear them, but to learn and to act and to do things differently. And I know the board will want to find ways of ensuring that Alan's story and your story, your family story, is incorporated into the work that we take forward. So Rhian, thank you very much indeed for that, and Becky, thank you very much indeed for demonstrating the sorts of things that we are attempting to do together.
Thank you.
Thank you
Everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the chair's report and the chief executive's report. just a couple of things to highlight in my report. I know that Paul will be saying a few words about Greg's imminent departure as our Deputy Chief Executive and Exec Director of Nursing. I won't say too much today. I'll probably have more opportunity to say a few things about Greg over the next couple of weeks. But what I will say on behalf of the board, as you are obviously a very valued member of this part of our organisation as a board, just to thank you on behalf of the entire board for your leadership and your support to Paul as the Deputy Chief Executive, but also as our Exec Director of Nursing. You've shown boundless energy, compassion, and passion for the role of nursing, for what they do for us, with us, for our patients, and your leadership has been exceptional. I know we're going to miss the flair. Your staff, I'm sure, will miss you as well. It has been wonderful seeing you in action, out and about in our hospital wards. Out there on your Fridays doing your ward job as a nurse. And you've always said that despite having the grandiose titles of Deputy Chief Executive and Executive Director of Nursing, fundamentally you're a nurse, and that has shone through in all the work you've done. I know there's a lot more that we're going to be saying in the next couple of weeks as we go through the national celebrations of Greg's contribution. But on behalf of the board, for everything you've done with us as a board, for the way in which you've engaged independent members, the way in which I know you've worked with the exec colleagues, and thank you as chair. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. A couple of other things just to mention this morning. I have touched in my report, it would be remiss of me not to say it. Tonight we do celebrate our staff. And I did start with that in my board report. And I know it may feel a bit strange going into that bit of a conversation, having listened to what we heard earlier. However, tonight is a really important milestone for the organisation. We are coming together to celebrate the achievement of our staff through a number of different categories. Lots of nominations for some amazing work that people do within our organisation, throughout our organisation, for so many different patients. And so I did want to reflect that in my report, that having seen the success of the Serenity of the Month awards that Paul introduced, and along with the team, we've now been able to bring all this together into at the start of an annual celebration, which is also the right thing to do because so many staff do amazing things within our organisation, and it was right that we would take the opportunity tonight to celebrate and to recognise the contribution that they make. There is one update to my report which I didn't put in before because we didn't have the information available. You'll remember that I mentioned to you as board members that the Cabinet Secretary wanted us to undertake a public accountability session in the course of the next 6 to 7 months. That date has now been set, provisionally set for the 23rd of October. You will know that there is a clear link between us as a board and as a service back to the Cabinet Secretary and to Welsh Government. He has a statutory responsibility to ensure that we are doing what we should be doing as a board. I'm doing what I should be doing as chair. And that will be a session where the Cabinet Secretary will be working with us to work through our performance data, to understand where we've got to as an organisation and what the ambition is going forward. So that public accountability session is now likely to be on the 23rd of October, but I'll email colleagues more information around that when we get it. There's nothing else I wanted to flag at this particular point. Are any questions on my report before I ask you to note it? And if it's just noting, if I could ask you just to ratify the use of the common seal, which is captured in item 3.1 of my report. Thank you for that. Thank you. We'll move on to the Chief Exec's report under 4.2. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, John. So, as you'll see in my report, there's an update there on the escalation status, which remains unchanged. But really pleased to report the progress we're seeing in a number of areas, particularly worth noting, I think, the brilliant improvement that we've seen in the ambulance handover performance across all the organisation, particularly currently at Prince Charles Hospital, who are top of the tree for Wales, if not the world, at the moment on ambulance handovers, and are really doing well. But Royal Glamorgan and Prince of Wales also seeing improvements and are chasing along behind quite closely, which is really positive. Obviously, the urgent care pathway isn't just about ambulance handover, it's the timing in department, it's the whole flow through the hospital, but it's really good to see the improvement, and that's been noted very much by colleagues in Welsh Government, and we've had a number of positive engagements recently with colleagues in Welsh Government about our improvements in that area. So really like to thank everybody for the work that's gone on to improve in that really key metric. Similarly, good progress around our elective care performance and some of the redesign of services that we've seen in September, with the orthopaedic services being relocated to Princess of Wales and cataracts. Really good performance that we're seeing now in those particular areas. Orthopaedics working well with a dedicated ward down at POW, and cataracts also performing above where we'd planned for it to be, which is again really positive, and shows, I think, by bringing some of these things together, it gives the opportunity to really sort of drive greater productivity and efficiency in our services. So that's really positive progress towards improvement in our 104 position, but also the wider improvement around planned care. Also just wanted to outline where we are at on women's hubs. You'll know this is a big priority for Welsh Government. The ask is that every health board has a women's hub established by in March. We have a programme of work underway at the moment, particularly with our colleagues in Oxford and Gynae, but also community services, because the ambition is that these hubs are located in community settings, and very much working that interface between primary care and secondary care. And Claire's overseeing that approach in CTM with our colleagues in obstetrics gynecology, and we've had some central funding for supporting that rollout, and I think we're on track to have that in place in line with the expectations of Welsh Government, which is good. But there is a great degree of interest from Cabinet Secretary, the First Minister herself, on making sure that those are delivered. So good to see the progress on that, and we'll bring a further update on that later on to the board. Also just wanted to update on where we are with the shift pattern consultation. You'll know that we began that consultation early this year. The formal consultation process has now closed. It was extended till the beginning of September, but that's now closed. There's been a lot of feedback, as you can imagine. 1,100 odd responses received to the consultation, both from individual members of staff, but also obviously formally through the unions. The process is underway at the moment, obviously, to review all that feedback and the comments that we've received from colleagues. Clearly, there is a view from trade unions which doesn't support the shift pattern that we are proposing, but we are trying to come up with some discussions now with trade union colleagues to try and work out how we may be able to listen to the consultation process, adapt our proposals that still delivers a standardised roster across CTM, but that also takes into account some of the other concerns that have been raised by colleagues, particularly around how do we incorporate time for CPD, how do we make sure the break and the make-up shift is not too onerous for individuals. But that will be coming back to board as a formal proposal in November. I don't know, how is there anything else you need to say?
Exactly what you said, really. Just a couple of things as well nationally that we're trying to build into what we're designing. So we're having live conversations with trade union colleagues who've themselves also come forward with a couple of suggestions. We're just working through that, and as you said, there'll be something coming for the board in November by way of an update and on the detail of that.
Really positive news also to highlight that we recently had an inspection from the Human Tissue Authority, who review all of the way in which our mortuary services are managed and how we handle human tissue in the CTM. Those of you who are newish to the organisation may not know, but back in I think it was 2019, we had a very, very challenging inspection from the HTA. Dilys will remember, Greg will remember, and it was not good. What's really amazing is that we've had a fantastic review from the HTA recently, where actually they've picked up some of the things that we're doing as nationally good practice and want to share it with other health boards and across the wider UK as well. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everybody who works in those in pathology, mortuary services, often people beavering away really hard behind the scenes who are not, the unseen workforce that are working in this really, really delicate area, this really sensitive area, but have done an amazing work in turning this around. And I don't know, Dom's been heavily involved through conversations with them, but Dom, do you want to say?
Yeah, there's danger in picking out names, but I think we do have something which other health boards don't, which is this Paul Davis, who's the designated individual, and he's been driving that himself. And what happened was within the report, they came back and said, "Oh, there's a problem with a switch on it." Well, they are this detailed in terms of the power supply. By the end of the day, that was fixed and sorted. No problem at all, because Paul got onto it. So there's an element of managing it and keeping on top of it all. But in the report, there were no issues that had to be done. All we had were recommendations that we should think about doing over the next year, which is an incredible achievement. The only thing I will say, the inspector said it's the first time he's ever had a report which fed back like that, where you've got more than one site manager on it. So he thought it was incredible.
So really positive feedback there. So thank you, a big thank you to all the teams. Dom and I have written to the teams to thank them for all their hard work and congratulate them on the positive outcome. Also, just finally to say, you'll know that the Cabinet Secretary has announced that he has commissioned an All Wales assurance review of maternity and neonatal services across Wales. There is an independent chair of that process who's been appointed to oversee the assurance work. It's commencing now. And will run until December time with a review, with feedback coming early in the new year, I think, from that process. Obviously, we know some of the challenges that the maternity and neonatal services can have, and we can obviously have our own experiences here in CTM of managing an external view. So I think we feel pretty well placed to respond to this process. We know the sorts of questions that will be being asked. Suzanne, obviously, as our Director of Midwifery, is heavily involved in this process, but there are obviously a lot of UK-wide concerns around maternity services that are happening at the moment. You'll know the UK government in England have commissioned a similar review. There is lots of concern, obviously, from families and women who are raising concerns about maternity. So I think it's really positive that we are responding to those concerns. Obviously, there's been a recent review in Swansea Bay, but that's also been very difficult, I think, for that organisation to deal with in terms of feedback and understandably lots of family concern about that. So it's really important, I think, we engage actively, which we will do, and we'll obviously bring back the feedback that comes from that panel to the board. It will be in early 2026, I think, by the time we get the feedback on that. But just to say that's underway. And just finally, obviously, can't not say my thanks, Greg. There'll be plenty of chance. It's the longest goodbye.
I don't like the fuss. I don't like the
fuss. But on a personal level, I think when Greg goes, he'll be the last exec who was here when I started in CTM. So that's a bit of a
finally, Paul.
Yeah, I know. But Greg's just talking about maternity and neonatal. Greg had bore the brunt of a lot of that work, and particularly the understandable unhappiness for many families and the community, and it was a pretty difficult first year or so when Greg arrived in the organisation to have to suddenly deal with that, but he dealt with it amazingly well, and had to deal with a range of external stakeholders who weren't always easy to work with, but Greg managed to navigate his way through with those people and ensure that the outcomes for those individuals and families and the stakeholders' confidence in our services was transformed to the place it is now. So that's only one aspect of what Greg's done whilst he's been here. There's been so many other things he's been responsible for, but I know he's going to go and enjoy a different challenge in his new role. But we will really very much miss him in the organisation, and I know he leaves a legacy behind him of despite what we've heard this morning, a really focused nursing and midwifery workforce who know what they're trying to achieve for our population. And I think I'm sure his legacy will live on through Richard. Through Richard, but yeah, just say my thanks. Thank you. That's it.
Any questions to Paul on his report? Okay, thank you, Paul. We'll note the report. Item 5, the establishment of the South East Wales Regional Joint Committee. The papers in front of you following probably quite a lengthy piece of work that we've been going through as a collection of boards to pull together terms of reference as supporting documentation here. I'm going to ask Claire and Gareth to introduce the item this morning, but I think this is quite an exciting challenge, but great set of opportunities.
Thanks, Chair. So a number of people around the table have been part of developing this, as John has said, but this marks an important step change in the opportunity for regional collaboration, and it's timely, isn't it, that we have the Consistent Health Park paper also on the agenda today, because this is some of the architecture that is going to help us to do some of those, make some of those big changes in service of South East Wales population. So I won't go through the detail of the paper. I know Gareth's happy to talk to any of the details of the terms of reference, but essentially this provides the architecture for us to delegate powers into the joint committee for decision making collectively in future. That would be an explicit change. We would make those decisions here and then pass that power over. But it's important that we understand that's what the joint committee can do. And so it's an opportunity to reduce duplication and share our governance and enable that collective leadership. So it's so importantly about how we create an environment in which our people can do their best work across our health boards. So it isn't just about this health board and how we work, but how we work together and how we enable our teams to work together in the interests of that 1.5 million population. I think the only other thing I wanted to say is that it is not about the architecture. It is about the ways of working and a new collective will around that. So importantly, the Regional Joint Committee will start with a shared purpose, starting with the why, and considering the spectrum of collaboration. So what is it that we are going to do in service of that why? And it's often said that change goes at the pace of trust. So there is a huge amount within the setup of the Regional Joint Committee that is about how we develop trust and work together in a new way. So I think the paper asks that we approve the establishment of the Joint Committee, that we note that the chair will be appointed at the first meeting from the chairs of the 3 health boards, that we determine the membership, note those wider conditions for success, and approve the establishment of a regional OD programme to support those wider conditions.
Thank you, Phil. Gareth.
Yeah, just to echo what Claire said there, it is largely about how we work as 3 organisations, but clearly we need to have the framework within which we'll work, which is what obviously the terms of reference set out today. And in devising those, that was obviously done in a collaborative format between myself and my 2 counterparts, Iron Bevan and Cardiff and the Vale. And just to remind everyone, which Claire alluded to as well, is that the things that the Regional Joint Committee will be responsible for will be delegated from the 3 boards, and that the Regional Joint Committee does not replace the responsibilities of the individual 3 boards, and neither does it circumvent the responsibilities of the 3 accountable officers as well, which is another important point set out in the paper. But it is a new and hopefully effective way of working in a regional way for the benefit of virtually half the population of Wales. So I think it's a really significant Regional Joint Committee that we're looking to set up.
Thank you, Gareth. Patsy.
A massive opportunity, isn't it, of working together. Couple of concerns, I have to say. One is that it doesn't become like the old WISC, which was a joint committee set up from the health boards, with the health boards retaining their statutory responsibilities. But as we know, that didn't work as well as we would have wanted. And the other thing that concerns me is on paragraph 2.1.1, the very last sentence is health boards may, and it's that word may, choose to be bound by the majority view at the joint committee. Now, I get that that is in relation to their statutory responsibility for their own population and their commission of work from places like Paris, and of course I'm going to be interested in. But what does that actually do then for the work on the LHP? And how does that render the dispute resolution paper right at the end of this to have teeth? If that word may is in there.
Thanks, that's really helpful. Gareth, do you want to come back on the?
So I think, obviously, as alluded to in the papers, the intention would be, Patsy, is that we try and achieve everything through consensus, but obviously we have to sort of make provision for any potential scenario where there is disagreement between the three health boards. Because I think setting up a regional joint committee for three health boards is obviously by its nature more complicated than two, as the case in South West Wales. So what the dispute resolution sort of outlines is an escalation method, which would allow us to go through various stages where we have to get to a conclusion. But as I said at the outset, the Regional Joint Committee does not replace the statutory responsibilities of the individual health boards. So I don't know whether Claire wanted to add anything to that.
So I think it goes back to change happens at the pace of trust. So the change, this is a first step in terms of reference. It's the beginning of the way of working, isn't it? It's a commitment to doing it differently, not doing it in the way that we've done it before. But if we start from a point of compromising sovereign organisations on day one, before we've even met and before those relationships have been developed, I think that sets us up on a particular path, doesn't it? And we have to move in lockstep and not be seen that any one party wants something but the others don't, so we have to do that together. But the intent.
With all the decisions that happen from the joint, who does that come straight back to board? Does that go to a sort of committee?
It is the committee, so it'll just be like one of that to be like one of our committees, exactly.
Okay. And then we'll get to like report back.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think the opportunity here is for three substantive statutory bodies with a huge financial firepower delivering services to 1.5 million people to start to think a bit more ambitiously about the types of services we could be better at delivering together. And 1.5 million in South East Wales is quite a defined geographical location. Look at our transportation links by road and by rail. Look at how people will live in one bit of South East Wales and probably work and socialise in other bits which fall into other health board areas. We've got quite a jam-packed bit of the nation. It does lend itself, I think, economically, culturally, socially, in terms of where families are, in terms of where people work, to be thinking about where some of our services are located and the style and shape, size of those services. And I think it does perhaps give us that opportunity to have some of those open, honest conversations around what does the future look like, and how do we do things in a more joined up way. We're already doing this in terms of LHP, which is exciting. As a regional offer, and there are lots of things we will need to work through. The digital architecture, for example, is something I think we'll need to reflect on, and lots of other things that may fall within that sort of conversation. So, I think where we got to with this work, I think has been really quite exciting. People have been engaged in it. I know the directors of planning across the three boards, the directors of corporate governance, chief exec chairs, have been doing what they can to get things into the place at which we're at today, to kickstart this process. It doesn't diminish what we do as a health board for our population. It just means we start to think differently about how we work with others to realise some of that firepower. Get in, and then I'll look myself as well. And then
Thanks, Chair. I think this is really welcome. We're working far more collaboratively with both the Nyren Bevan and Cardigan Vale health boards on a range of areas, and actually having a more formal governance arrangement sitting around that, I think is to be welcomed. And I guess, you know, we when we approach this, it has to be on the principle of success breeds success, and we have to make, you know, we've got a number of areas where we're working collaboratively, but you know, you've touched on LHP, we've got ophthalmology at the moment, where we've got a single cataract plan, a single cataract sort of delivery model, which is maturing, and we're finding our feet through that. The piece I think that is really important that we mustn't lose sight of, however, and Claire is spot on raising the whole issue of trust, is that the, you know, that OD piece underpinning how we work together, having, you know, not, you know, we've all got our own responsibilities, haven't we? And it's how do we actually act for the benefit of the whole population of South East Wales? We have got a real opportunity to use our resources differently, to expand the services, to provide better services for our population, and we must see this as an opportunity, notwithstanding the you know, some of those pitfalls, and that's why we need to do it properly, and we need, you know, we need to build it. But I think the opportunity and potential benefit is so significant that it is something that we should really be supporting wholeheartedly.
Thanks, Catherine. Dilys.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree, it's a really important move forward for the health board, and there's been an awful lot of work put into the papers that we've got in front of us today to make sure that we are ensuring good governance, etc. And my question is around the governance, because it said the governance support will rotate annually among the health boards based on the chairing arrangement place. I'm not 100% sure that that will work, that the governance support changing every year, because you build relationships, you build processes, etc. If the boards work slightly differently, etc. So just raising a slight concern about whether that will actually work, although I can see why one particular health board might not want to take on that extra responsibility completely.
Thanks for this. It's a really valuable comment. So I think, yeah, as we start the process and get into it, whoever is appointed chair of the Regional Joint Committee will probably chair the first 18 months or so to the end of March, end of March 2027. And you know, I think as we get into it, we can see how this resource at the minute, we're literally going to be asking our current teams to support this process. I think there may well be a question around how do we resource the type of work and activity we want to do together as we go through it. But I think we'll start and then reflect as to whether or not that needs to change. But I think, you know, it could be quite a significant amount of work for colleagues to take on, notwithstanding the fact that we're also going to be asking all of those people who are participating in the Regional Joint Committee, at both exec director and IM level, to take on those additional responsibilities. So it is additional work, but of course it's valuable work, and I think we've got to see it in those terms. But I think, yeah, we'll kickstart the process and see where we get to. But it's a really helpful point. Thanks. Sorry, I have a list which I almost missed earlier. Neil and then Howell. Thank you. Thanks, Neil.
Yeah, really, I genuinely think it's an exciting opportunity. I was in a separate meeting yesterday and we were looking at clinical trials in Wales. I'm just trying to think more holistically about where do we think the benefits and the opportunities are here. When you automatically go to LHP, you automatically think of orthopedics, but there are so many other things as well that we're doing across the boards, where there are synergies that we could try to tap into. So research came up yesterday. We massively under-index in Wales. What's coming back from the research community is it's difficult to deal health board by health board. So there's an opportunity for us to step forward and say, well, for research, here's 1.5 million people that we can actually start to talk about. And I think that's an area which could be an area for opportunity. There's great things that we've done here. We've seen previously, we've done some fantastic work on sustainability. Why do we have to do that kind of work in every health board individually? So I think it's just thinking a bit more holistically about where are the opportunities for us to actually find synergies across the different boards. But I think it's tremendously exciting.
Thanks, Dan.
You know, agree entirely with Neil there. There are huge opportunities. I guess just to sort of emphasise the point really that while the establishment of the regional committee is a really good thing, good step in and of itself, and on its own, it won't get us to where we need to be. OD is a term that's used as an answer to everything frequently. I would slightly reframe that as a sort of leadership ask. So OD will enable leadership, and what's required to make this work will be leadership in 3 organisations, and for that to permeate through the 3 organisations. I think we had what I thought was a really positive first meeting of regional partners. I think that was this week, but I can't remember, to talk about what that might look like. So we're in the process of starting to design what some of that kind of OD leadership work might look like already. And we'll obviously keep the board and the regional committee up to date on that, but yeah, really supportive.
Thanks, Harold. Dom and then Carolyn. Thank you.
Mine's only a very quick point on there as well. I mean, I heavily endorse it. It's the only way what we're going to do, accepting that we're still going to be working separately, but we're going to be working together as well. It's trying to get that balance between the two. The research thing, absolutely. They've been trying to do a national push on it, and it's not got anywhere. No. So we need to be more flexible on that. Yeah, but we're not big enough on our own to take on a lot of those things, whereas region is that perfect fit. And I think clinically, my point is going to be that actually we're coming across more and more issues now where we need to have some way of being able to put a structure in place to support us doing it. So the mess that we have with the vascular setup and how that was working now, again, we need to have that. That's now being resolved by having a regional group. I'm now working with a plan looking at the interventions not long been undertaken, or interventions in Wales. Nationally, it's not going anywhere, so we're going to have a regional group. We started doing that. The first question: what's the governance structure behind it? You know, these are all the things that will enable us to start making steps into the area we want to do. So I can't speak to
that. Quick point. The trust thing, I think it will be really good for us to get feedback early days to say whether you think that's there, and if you don't think it's there, how it's addressed very quickly. The other thing is, while I support all of this, we've already said several times today, it doesn't work nationally, so we'll do it regionally. To me, that is not really the answer, because if something is not working nationally, we do need to address that. What we don't want to do is duplicate things that should be happening elsewhere. So there's a balance, and I think there's a lot, but don't just think we'll ignore that. None of that works, because there's a lot of money and effort going into things. If they're not working, that should be addressed. And I do think there's a lot of working around things that don't work nationally, and we can't afford to do that. If it doesn't work, stop it, and we'll do it regionally, but don't do both. So that's my concern there.
And I think I think in echoing something very similar to that, where there's the need for some caution in the approach, is that sometimes you can get into a scenario where people think we're not doing something well enough in a locality, therefore there is a regional solution to it. We've seen it with the regional partnership boards in the way that they have grown, used sometimes by governments, but also other partnerships, to think that, okay, well, things aren't working in the way that we're delivering something individually. Therefore, there must be a collective response at a regional level that solves the problem. That it may well be the case that we're just not solving the problem ourselves because we just haven't nailed it. It doesn't mean that a regional response would make it any different. So we've got to be also in our minds cautious about those things that will naturally lend themselves to being on a bigger footprint, and those things that are just simply that we're not getting right, that just need our effort and collective effort locally to get right. So I think whilst I think the ambition can be there, the excitement about doing things differently and working with others, you know, you've also got to measure that in our heads as to what we think will work well and how and why. So I'm just probably a very similar point in that sense. Paul.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a big step forward, I think, and candidly, if you think about the past 12 months or 18 months with some of the backs and forth we've had around LHP, had we had the regional committee, probably it would have given us a greater degree of clarity and direction from the top, which would have enabled perhaps some of the decisions to have happened more in a more streamlined and effective way, I think, maybe. So I think in some ways that's shone a light on the fact we didn't have that. And, you know, I think we've got so far through sort of informal governance arrangements between the 3 organisations, but there comes a point where you do need to put more of a structure down. I think the challenge we're going to have, and as colleagues have just articulated, there are lots of areas that would benefit from regional working. The challenge is, candidly, is that just the capacity to do it, because you're asking people to do that on top of their day jobs. So there's something I'm sure as we go through this process, we'll get into a territory which would perhaps be more of, well, actually, if we want to do a bit of regional work, we don't need 3 different people doing it. We can have one person that takes the lead on behalf of all 3 organisations. And I suppose that, to Claire's earlier point, will be the test then of how trusting and confident we are to enable one colleague, say from AB, to take a lead stroke services, and we feel confident that they're doing it with the interest of everybody, not just with their own organisation hat. So there is a big cultural shift we have to make, but I think the important thing is to get the mechanics sorted, so we've got this structure in place. But as always with these things, the real work will be how the work gets done and how the relationships are built and developed and maintained moving forward. And I guess the real test is how do we deal with conflict and difficult positions? And I'm just thinking, we have all these great words, but I think, the test will be when we get into the planning process, how are we going to handle the conflicts between us, AB, Cardiff, where we're saying, we don't agree with the LTA, we think you need to be paying us more money for this or that or the other. So that is going to be, I think, something that we're going to need to work through, and actually having a committee like this perhaps is helpful for that, because it gives a place where some of those conversations can be aired and discussed in a more broad way, rather than perhaps the sort of bilateral conversations we've had today.
Just one final reflection. Some people may feel that this is a revolutionary idea. This has been working in local government for a number of years. The Cardiff Capital Region covers the 10 local authorities of South East Wales, and there is good evidence there of how that relationship has matured, how decisions have been taken, where investment has been put into the region of South East Wales in terms of that economic agenda. So, I think public bodies can work together. I think there's good reasons to do so. So, I've got a number of requests on my list. Thank you to Claire and Gareth, and thanks again for the enormity of the work that you guys have led. Can I ask the board to approve the establishment of the South East Wales Regional Joint Committee and its terms of reference and operating arrangements as attached? Thank you very much. We'll note the fact that the RJC will appoint a chair from its membership with a rotating period of appointments. Governance support will be provided by the Health Board of the chair appointed as the RJC chair, and obviously we can reflect on how well those arrangements work in the course of perhaps the first year to 18 months. We'll determine the membership from each respective Health Board to join the Regional Joint Committee in line with the membership requirements that are set out in the report, and note the wider determinants for the RJC's long-term sustainable success, and obviously importantly, as we touched on earlier, the development if I can ask you to approve the development of a regional OD programme for the RJC and its partners, which will be absolutely critical as we get into that first phase. Thank you very much. We shall move on to item 6, our board governance arrangements, and item 6.1 is the action log. It's for noting there are some actions which remain open. Any questions on the action log? No? Are you happy just to note the action log? Okay, thank you very much. I don't think there are any matters arising under item 6.2. So we'll move into 6.3, the board assurance framework, and I'll ask Gareth to present the update report. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the board assurance framework, members of the board will recall at the July meeting there was quite a substantive update to the BAF on that occasion. A number of risks have been updated. In the one risk that hadn't been was strategic risk number 9. I made a commitment to bring that back at this meeting, so I'm pleased to report that we have now got that risk updated. It's been escalated through to the BAF in work from Sally and Andrew in finance, and obviously Callie and my team to get that risk back on to the BAF for 25-26, and that is a strategic risk you will have seen in previous years around failure to plan and manage revenue resources within the resource limits which are set by Welsh Government. So that is very much back on the BAF for this financial year as well. Apart from that, there are no other substantive changes on this occasion in terms of new risks or the scoring of those strategic risks there. But obviously the detail behind each of those risks and the controls are documented in the appendix. And just to remind everyone, all of this is underpinned by the organisational risk register, which obviously the committee scrutinises whether each of those items. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Gareth. And there are some approvals the board are being asked to give shortly. Any questions for Patty? Thanks.
A really pedantic point, so I apologise in advance. But the new risk in there around resources, absolutely agree with it. But it says failure to plan. Now, we all agreed the plan, so we can't really say there was a failure to plan. It's the implementation of that plan and the management within the health board, which I'm not criticising, I absolutely get and understand. But the planning bit was good, I thought. I told you it's pedantic.
No, it's just
It's very good. The plan itself was good.
Gareth.
I guess what I would say is I think the plans do evolve through the year as well. So
Yes,
it's making sure that our plan always remains up to date and valid, I guess.
Yeah.
That's not detracting away from the quality of the plan at front. But yeah, I do agree there's some nuance around that.
Does it need to be adapted to say failure to deliver the plan? Maybe that. Because I agree, when we set the plan at the beginning of the year, we set a plan that was a balanced plan. So you could argue, well, it's then how you monitor and deliver the plan.
And we reflect that we need to manage it anyway.
Yeah.
We'll make that change. If that's thanks, Maxine. No, you weren't being pedantic. It's absolutely a fair point. And I didn't. I certainly didn't spot it. So in terms of that escalation of risk number 9, if we say the failure to implement the plan. That's probably we'll find a form of words and perhaps that we can just sense check that with the board, perhaps by email afterwards. If that's okay. Yeah, I'm quite happy to do that. Otherwise, we'll try and get a form of words amongst the committee approach, which means we'll end up with 3 paragraphs. I don't think that can be sensible either. Any other questions to Gareth? The board is also being asked to approve amendments to the existing risks. I can confirm the updates provide adequate assurance and reflect recent discussions. Again, I'm really pleased with the amount of work that we did as an organisation to refine this. And I think refine it is more than a refinement. When this came back to board at the end of July, so really pleased with the shape we've got it in. No comments. Happy to approve that. Thank you very much. Okay, good. We'll move on to item 6.4, the board, committee, and advisory group highlight reports. We'll start with the Quality, Safety and Experience Committee. Carolyn, I'll come to you now as Chair of Quality, Safety and Experience Committee to provide an update on the committee report following the meeting on the 22nd of July. I know that you had a meeting on the 23rd of September as well. So if there is any update following that, that would be really helpful. So thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of general comments. I am feeling very reflective about the patient experience part of this agenda, as I mentioned earlier. So I think we'll just focus a bit more on that. We do focus on it, but I just wonder if we're focusing enough. And I do just want to comment that the quality of papers and reports coming to the committee is excellent. They've really improved, I think, over the last year or so. People are very succinct, and that makes a big difference in getting through a huge agenda. So I just want to say thank you to those who are responsible for that. In terms of the highlight report, paediatric general dental anaesthetic list has been on our agenda for a long time, and there's been huge concern about this. And I do want to just note the update that there has been really good progress with that. Theatre list has been reinstated, and we understand there's a plan to clear that backlog. So that was very good to hear. So good to note that. We also noted as Paul mentioned in his report, the Welsh Government assessment of maternity services and the implications of that and our involvement with that. Stroke services is something that always remains on our agenda. And again, just from the meeting this week, it was really good to see a huge amount of work and a huge amount of progress, noting that some of the metrics are still quite poor. And we all acknowledge that, but we also acknowledge a huge amount of work that's gone on there to improve services. So obviously that's something we'll be keeping a close eye on. We endorse the research and development strategy and the annual quality data, annual duty quality report, which is coming here, I think, for approval. And I think those are the only things I really wanted to highlight, but obviously happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Karen. That's really helpful. Any questions to Karen on the committee work?
Sorry, just on the question of GA paediatric dental lists, just to confirm, the current range, we will be down to 26 weeks by Christmas, and by the end of March we'll be back down to probably a 2 to 3 week window for surgery for that cohort. So it is back very much on track.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Karen. Board will note the update. We'll just come to the operational delivery committee update under item 6.4.2, and I'll ask Patsy perhaps to provide an update on the committee's work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is the report from July, and I wanted to highlight the positive escalation on ambulance handover. I know Paul's already done that, but we had at the quality and safety meeting earlier on this week, and we were pleased to see that has continued right through the summer. And what we didn't hear, which was really good, was the negative impact that ambulance handover time reduction was having within the ED area, which, you know, wasn't the case several years ago. There was a massive impact on offloading everybody that came in. I was in the health service at that time, so I know, you know, the impact of that. That doesn't appear to be happening now. At least we're not hearing that is happening. So that can only be positive. And the only other thing is in the advice, the financial performance and the forecast savings being significantly below target. We've heard on the back about the impact of that, and that was the only other thing I wanted to raise.
Thank you, Patsy. Thank you, Richard.
Just one thing to note on relation to what you said, Patsy, absolutely you're correct. But one of the things that we'd be live to just around assurances to the board is to ensure enhanced monitoring. So whilst we sustain our performance on the forecourt, we need to make sure that internally within the emergency department and indeed the wards, that we're not necessarily creating or we're not seeing unintended consequences of good performance.
And I had an accountability meeting on Monday with the Cabinet Secretary, and he was asking about, you know, plans to ensure that we can sustain our, you know, really quite superb improvement and performance around handover times. I talked about some of the work that the team were doing internally just to keep track of where we were, but also to make sure that we were looking at our entire system, because, you know, how effective we are getting people through ED will also be dependent on other parts of the system working as effectively as possible. And I did mention the fact that, you know, Gethin and the team and others have been working very closely with our local authority partners to help ensure that people are leaving hospital, particularly where they have an identified social care need, and that, you know, the local authorities in Merthyr Tydfil and RCT have been working really hard to, you know, to improve, you know, the outturn, I suppose, of patients from you know, our large hospitals.
Yeah, I agree that there's been no specific patient safety issues reported within the ED, but we have to remember we are still boarding, and in Prince Charles, triple boarding. So that's one patient within what would have been an old treatment room, and 2 patients within an extra bed in each ward. Now, thankfully, Prince Charles have big wards, so patients don't feel as cramped there as what they do over here. But nevertheless, the site is still really hot, and it's not a nice experience for patients when you're in the middle of a bay. But in terms of the safety issues, nothing's raising through the governance systems.
Thank you. Any questions to Patsy on the working committee? No? Thank you. We'll note the report. And the last item under item 6 is the Mental Health Act Monitoring Committee meeting at the 20th of August. And I'll ask Kath to provide the update. Thank you, Kath.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to take the paper as read and just really wanted to alert, I guess, around staffing vacancies, particularly around sort of fragility, I suppose, that we've got around the clinical medical cover. I think the committee felt that we wanted to escalate that to board, but bearing in mind that there are mitigations in place around that. So that's still quite a challenging area for us around Mental Health Act, but also to alert from a very positive point of view, the HIW unannounced visit towards 7 in Ysbyty Cynnon Hospital, which was really, really positive. So we were really pleased to hear about that in the committee. So challenge and really good progress being made in other areas.
Yeah.
And I won't cover the rest of the things that's in the paper.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gav. Any questions? Oh,
Yeah, just one thing from a wider mental health perspective. Anna Llewellyn, our nurse director, will be retiring in November. So huge thanks, for her leadership over the last 5-6 years. I think most board members know Anna. She's been extraordinary. So she'll be leaving in November.
Thank you for the update. I'm sure we'll catch up with Anna in due course to thank them, to wish all the very best. But yeah.
Just on that point about the mental health staffing, medical staffing, we had a conversation only on Monday at execs about that very issue, Kath. So Claire Williams came along and we had quite a long conversation about mental health services in the round, but particularly some of the pressures around medical workforce and the pressures that brings in terms of responsible clinician. So there is work going on to see what we can do to try and improve it, but it's against the backdrop of a national UK-wide shortage and challenge in psychiatry. So yeah.
Dom and then Gethin.
Well, I think we're going to say no. Oh, okay, fine. Literally hot off the press this morning. I won't name the individual yet, but we've got someone who's agreed to be the interim care group medical director for mental health on a basis whilst we recruit substantially into that. So this individual will be fantastic at supporting and driving forward.
Really good to know. Gethin, Howell, and then Philip. Thank you.
I think there is nationally there's a real struggle around recruitment of consultant psychiatrists, particularly in adult mental health. Our current operating model, the way in which we structure the way in which our services are located, will add some of that complexity. And so part of the work we need to do, looking at the sort of strategic direction for our mental health services, is very much about how do we shift to an operating model that enables us to use the workforce we've got more effectively, and prioritise them to be able to provide more care delivery, and that is a big part of the transformation programme that's running in mental health, and will come to board in due course.
Oh.
I was just going to say it won't solve the problem entirely because it's a tricky problem, but we have also just been awarded some funding by Welsh Government, external funding to recruit 2 specialty doctors and 1 consultant psychiatrist. So hopefully that will partly contribute to improving the position. And we're also doing some specific work with mental health colleagues around just broadening our net a little in terms of how we recruit psychiatrists, recognising national shortage, but in terms of branding for us in the market, we're quite a tricky organisation to brand. People often don't know what our name means. They don't know where we are geographically. So just trying to be a bit more creative about how we recruit in the market.
And mine's just really for context. The Welsh Government have recently published the mental health and wellbeing strategy and suicide and self-harm strategy. Off the back of that, the public health team are soon to complete, will definitely be completed by Christmas, a healthcare needs assessment for tiers 0 to 1 mental health and wellbeing, and there'll be a work package or work plan put together for that. Although it won't solve the problem in terms of acute, obviously it's all about ensuring that people's mental health and wellbeing is caused the problem.
Thank you for that. Okay. We'll note the report. It's now 10:30. I'm proposing we take a break. If colleagues can return to start in time for 11:15, that would be fantastic. So,